The year was 2011, and I had just started at Telltale Games working on pre production for Telltale's The Walking Dead. I was the only character artist on the project at the time, so I got to help craft the style and work out how we would make these characters. Some things were already decided though. Derek Sakai, who was the art director, informed me that we wanted it to be reminiscent of the original comic books, not the show. And we already had a demo level that emphasized inked line work like a comic book with relatively flat shading. So I had to come up with an approach for the characters. And there were a few things that influenced this. Firstly, I was told we could not use cell shading for The Walking Dead. And then I wanted to limit the tools we used because I knew Telltale wasn't flush, so I could score brownie points by saving them money. And thirdly, finally, I wanted to come up with an approach that the future artists could also emulate relatively easily. So, how was this done, you might ask? Let's take a look at the texture process for a character on Season 1 of Telltale's The Walking Dead.
This is Clementine from Season 1. She's mostly lit by an ambient light, and it's really the diffuse texture that is controlling the look here that's providing the modeling. So for example, if I was to go and grab her head, this is the texture map, right? There's a lot of, you can see there's a lot of modeling, and it's intended to have kind of a painterly feel to it. Clementine did not have much inking on there, but the idea is that it's inspired by a comic book, so she's kind of got some inked lines on there. You can see a bit on her hands. And you can definitely see more in the overall model here. Yeah, so she's got some nice kind of inkling around her hoodie here. So in that game, for the most part, the lighting was pretty ambient and diffuse, and the texture took care of the modeling. However, there were scenes where we did use much more chiaroscuro
Kind of dramatic.
lighting, like a scary scene. Yeah, so the normal map, did come into effect, although not very much. We sculpted high-res models, and most of what we got from those was the baked lighting.
So now you have an overview. Let's actually make a texture for Walking Dead Season 1.
Okay, so here we are in ZBrush. I got myself a high-res zombie, which I'll use as my example model here, our little demo model. This guy's from Walking Dead Season 4, but he'll work for today. I'm going to turn off his eyeball, and the secret sauce for the textures in Walking Dead Season 1, among a couple of things, was what I call baked lighting. Just bear in mind this is 2011, and I was, I needed to keep the number of tools I used to a minimum to keep the cost down. Have other reasons as well. So what I did was I applied the matte cap white material to the models like this in ZBrush, and then I went up to a little app, lesser known perhaps app in ZBrush called Z App Link. It's down here. Oopsie. And the first thing you need to do is go to Z App Link properties, and you set your camera. So what we're going to do is we're going to project this matte cap onto the model as vertex color, right? Which actually reminds me, I should before I begin, add some vertex color, make sure the vertex paint mode is enabled and not the add, so RGB. And I'm just going to fill it with white to start. Let's go back to the app link, and here you're going to set your camera. So it's going to literally, in an orthographic view, it's going to project the front, and we want it to also project the sides and the back. So you start by setting the front. That automatically sets the opposite angle, which is the back, and then I'd set the right side, the character's right side, right, and that gets you left as well, and that should do the job. So I've already told ZAppLink to use Photoshop. That's an easy thing to do. Anyway, so you hit ZAppLink, You get this little window. So you could set your target app up here. So I've used Photoshop, and then you click OK. Takes a second. And so here we are in Photoshop. Now, and you can see there's multiple camera angles, and here's the layers. So here's the trick. So the front layer here, it's probably a bit small, but you've got this layer here that's called front Z shading, and this parenthesis do not edit, right? That's your material. And that kind of, I guess you could use that as a guide. And the front, the layer that just says front, back, right, and left, that's what you paint on. And when we go back in ZBrush, it's going to project whatever I paint on this layer back onto the model as vertex color, right? So here's the trick. I take that front shading, that matcap image, and I duplicate it. So I'll make another layer and just drag that down because it's important the naming convention is important here. So I'll turn off the original one and I'm just going to merge that down, right? So now the front layer, this is set to hard light, by the way. So the front layer has that matcap lighting literally baked into it, right? And then you just repeat the process. So I'll take that one, the back, and duplicate it, drop it down, merge it down. And of course, when I was doing this for Walking Dead, I set up an action in Photoshop. It was just a button click. Everything was standardized. But of course, I have long since deleted that. And for the demo, I don't need to we don't need to go to that trouble. So duplicate layer, drop it down, and finally the left side, same dealio. Merge that down. Now, once I'm done, I'll turn all these layers back on. And I don't think it matters what layer is selected. I'm selecting the very top layer. And I'm going to hit save. And then we go back to ZBrush, where we're going to enter ZBrush. So you click re-enter ZBrush. And then it's going to ask you if you want to accept the Photoshop data. You go, of course, accept. You do this for each side. It's projecting the color from Photoshop back onto the ZBrush model, and there you go. So it looks really dark because now we have the matcap data multiplied by the matcap data. So if I was to go, this is the flat color material. This is what we're looking at is literally no shading, right? That's the shading model in ZBrush, and this is the texture, right, which is vertex color right now. And that's it. So that's the first part. That's the major step, is projecting that lighting data. And of course, you could say, well, it looks a lot like an AO map. But the difference with an AO map is, it's like AO shades all the cavities, but there's no specific ambient occlusion. It's an ambient kind of cavity map versus this, where you can see that it has a light direction, which is predominantly from the top. And of course, you'd say, oh, but what happens when you change the light direction? Well, that's kind of the quirky nature of this approach. And the idea was generally to keep the lighting pretty kind of diffuse, um, you know, and you kind of you tone it down a little bit so it's not like glaringly obvious, but this will give us this is going to be the foundations for a painterly look, like on the overall color. Feel it pop in. Okay, so we've got our baked lighting, and I'm going to do another layer, which will be our basic color. So for that, I'm just going to duplicate this head right now, and I'm going to call that color. Make sure it's all high. And as you can see, I've made a palette in the background here. Although we were looking at the comic book for inspiration, I did go to the series, the Walking Dead series, for the color of my zombies because they're so good. It was just really good reference. So what I've done is grabbed some photo reference and kind of blurred it a bit and sampled some colors. So I'll start, make sure RGB and color over here. Going to fill this sucker, maybe like that. And I'll turn on a different material so we can kind of see the details. All right, away we go. So one thing I like to do is mask by cavity and drop in some kind of ambient kind of looking crevices here. And just grow it a bit. I'll go mask, grow mask, and blur and invert. And I'll drop in the zombie blood is kind of a little desaturated. It's a bit more like a brown color. So we'll drop that in there. And away we go. So I think I'll start with the overall skin. I'm going to use a color spray and I'll drop an alpha on there like this one here. And we'll take one of our lighter colors. Give this a go here. Yeah, there you go. So the spray color is going to give us some nice variety here. And this is nice. I'm like, no pressure, just having some fun. Gonna do it pretty quickly. I'm gonna try and just bust this out so you just get the general idea of how you might approach this stuff. Um, yeah, so something I found working in games is every project I work on, you become immersed in that world. So I think I might have been a little bit hesitant to get into the world of The Walking Dead because it is a scary place. Um, although I had so much fun. I had so much fun. The first character I made wasn't Clementine or Lee, it was actually a zombie. And the reasoning, right? So my my opinion is that if you're designing a characters, a new character, a new style, look for a game, a pipeline, what have you, you're better to start with a less important character, not your main character, right? Because you're going to figure out things on that first character, and the next character you go you go to is going to benefit from everything you've learned. So you don't want to make your mistakes on the main character. And the peeps of Telltale were the Dave Bogan, Dirk Sakai, they kind of they were down with that. So I think it was Jason McCabe was a concept artist, designed the first zombie, which we called Jeff the zombie. I wish I still had some images of Jeff, right? Anyway, so we made Jeff, and I figured out the whole pipeline on Jeff, and then I think the next character I made was Clementine, and so she really benefited from everything we learned on Jeff, and things kept evolving over time. Um, so let's see, I'm just randomly painting. I'm not really focusing on what I'm doing. But I think what I should do actually is I'm going to give the area around his orbits here a little bit of a lighter color to kind of make it like a focal point, right? Here you go. this look like here? Nice random colors. Cool. So now I think what I want to do is kind of hit the gorier parts, right? And for that, I'm going to lose the cavity a little bit temporarily, and it'll clear that. So I really want to see what color. Yeah, we have a nice reddy brown. Let's hit this stuff here. And sculpting these things, I I definitely I use reference a lot. I mean, I hate to say it, but even on stuff like this, I would use real. I looked at the zombies from the series a lot, but you know what? I also looked at kind of real life. I mean, I think nothing beats real life, which is where things can get a bit messed up, because I would have just like the most horrendous desktops. My neighbors complained at one point because um, I was working on Carver's a horribly gory scene where this character gets his head kind of squashed by a concrete block, and and I had like just horrendous images up on my screen because that's I think the best way. Even though it's a stylized game, I wanted it to have an element of realism, like something, so it's not a cartoon, right? So yeah, so I really looked at real world stuff. Um, um, I can't. I think that's the way you got to do it. Um, get these gums in here. Now I don't have polygroups. Feeling a bit lazy. I need to get inside that mouth. So I think what I'm going to do, hide this, or hide the eye. I might still end up. Yeah, it works. Hey, it's good enough. I'll just keep going. Typically, I would create a polygroup for stuff like this because you're going to kind of go back to it, back and forth, so you want an easy way to isolate areas of the model. But since this is a demo, I'm just going to bust it out. I'm just going to go for it. This is the nice thing about doing something like this demo is, you don't have an art director, or anybody critiquing you. Um, and as long as you're not too, you don't want it to be perfect, that's all right. So that gives me some freedom here to, to just to play around. Let's get the other side. There we go. Yeah, it's perfect. I just got the edge there, so on the other side, so we can just. I love this. This color spray is glorious, right? It gives you that variety, that you want. So I've got, as you can see, I've got the alpha brush, so it's not just a blob of paint. It's got some texture to it, and the color spray, which is randomizing the color. The color it shows is like the seed, and then it's just kind of randomly kind of giving me variations on that seed color. And I think that goes a long way to giving things a realistic feel, like, because as you know, the real life is random, it's unpredictable. Now I don't want the lips to be too dark. I'm just getting in the cavities there a bit. There we go. So much fun. Oh my God. Excuse me. So frame. And I'm actually looking at reference off to my right. So I'm not going to share it because I just want to avoid any copyright issues. So I know that I am looking at photo reference from the series. It's horrendously gory. That's the other part of this. I don't want it to copyright and gore issues, right? So I think her lips could be. I'm calling her her. This is literally ambiguous. This character ends up being in the game ends up being a guy and a girl, right? Like it just Depends on how you dress it up, what kind of hair you put on it, because you got to save time, right? So a zombie face can pass for guy, girl, no problem. Um, let's see, I want a little bit of red. I'm going to dial that up a little bit lighter, a little desaturated maybe, and just come in here. Maybe I'll grab some of that color. Having so much fun with this. I'm in the middle of a kind of an intense project right now. Things are heating up, the pressure's on, so this is kind of nice just to take a break and do something just for fun. Now I am going to hit those teeth a little bit. There's my teeth color right down here in the corner. I'll sample that. Come in here, and maybe I'll dial down the opacity a little bit so it's not too. And I think I'll hide the back of the mouth so I'm not accidentally painting on that. And we'll just go in there, dial this up. Oops, keep doing nasty teeth. Looks like my teeth. Oh my God, the dentist wants to pull my teeth out now. God, getting old. Here we go. I think I'll dial up the intensity a little bit, just make the teeth a little bit lighter. Here we go. Let's turn the rest of the head on for a minute. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I'm gonna mask the back of her mouth like that, right? Zombies are so much fun. So I used to have one of the problems moral dilemmas I ran into working in the games industry is I wasn't comfortable with making things like super violent, right? And then, and this actually happened when I was working on The Walking Dead. I was listening to NPR at the time, and they were interviewing, I think it was Joe Ramirez, was a famous director of a kind of, apocalyptic stuff. And he pointed out that, uh, you know, horror movies are a way for us to kind of process the concept of death. It's a way of playing with the idea of death. Concepts like Halloween, when you got kids dress up as ghosts and you go trick or treating, it's making fun of a deep and serious kind of a subject that's scary, right? Death is scary, and so zombie movies, slasher movies are kind of our way of psychologically playing with this kind of traumatic concept of death. And that really that was an epiphany to me. And I looked at things in a whole new light after that. I felt a lot better about making a zombie game, you know, and I just dived headfirst into it. So there you go. I think I'll do a little bit more, pick out a little bit more of these details here. Gonna go with my nice deep red. I think typically too, I'd add some bruising around the wounds, so some purple colors would help here. Color like that, perhaps. Drop it down. Well, that looks gruesome, huh? Blah, gooey. Ooh. Okay, skin, and we'll just gonna make. Oops. Yeah. Little bruisy looking colors. So I'm gonna lose some of my edges. I should have thought of this before. Yeah, I'm gonna That might be a little too pink, but you know, like yeah, you're going to get bruising around a, a wound like the, like obviously there's what do you call it, blunt force trauma as well as the and the gouge. So that's going to give you a bit of nastiness there. Okay, just kind of keeping this loose, but just to finish this up, I think I'm going to go and do that cavity mask trick one more time and really just emphasize the cavities. I'll blur the sucker, and I'm going to go in and get a nice deep browny red. I'm going to make it quite dark. And I'll turn the opacity down initially just to kind of feel things out a bit here. But I think particularly in the wound area, this is going to help. I'll turn it back up just to kind of really emphasize the cavities. And if it was a realistic, I mean, if you turn the specular highlights on, that works quite nicely. And for this for the Walking Dead, obviously it was flat shaded. You didn't have spec highlights, so I did on occasion kind of paint in little highlights. Although I don't know that really worked that well, but I did do that. Okay, I like the skin shader because it's light enough you can see what you're painting, And I'll make the orbits a bit dark, right? Like a classic zombie, has dark orbits, and maybe under the nose too will really emphasize that. I think I went a little bit too far there. Let's see. Around here too. I'll really pop those cavities, but not everywhere, right? You want to have a bit of variety. So I think I'll kind of, so it's not too, uniform. You don't want it to be uniform. I think that's going to be good enough for demonstration purposes. So there's our color map in all its gory detail. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so here we are in Substance Painter. We're just going to bake a couple of maps. Back in 2011, when I was making the original characters, I used XNormal, which I think is still around and it's free. So that, of course, was a bonus. But today we're going to use Substance Painter. So anyway, off we go. Let's go to the bake window. And we only actually need a normal map, an ID, and an ambient occlusion. The ID, I'll just make sure that is set to vertex color. And I've set my ambient occlusion settings here for a bit of map. So let's do it. Let's hit that bake. Bake selected. I'm baking the color map first. All right, back to painting. And there we go.
Here I'm taking the ID map, i.e. the baked vertex color, and just plugging it into a color channel so we can see what we have.
Okay, so we've got our base color. The other thing we need to bake is that lighting data. So I've loaded that mesh up in here. This time we don't need to bake the normal map or the ambient occlusion. We just need the ID. And there we go. The baked lighting is now baked, and it's off to Photoshop, believe it or not. So we're going to leave the modern world of Substance Painter, go back in time, and we're going to do the sucker in Photoshop using the 3D paint feature.
All right, so we have traveled back in time. to the year. Oh, I don't know. This program I had back in 2011, maybe 2010. This is CS1, right before they moved to the subscription model. And they have a 3D paint feature here. So first we're going to open our model. You just go open, back in the day, you just go open model and click on that zombie head. And there we go. Over here we have a camera rotation tool, so we can rotate the model. Yeah, you can do 3D painting in the old Photoshop. New Photoshop still has that 3D button under window, but I don't know. I was having trouble getting it to work, so I just thought, let's just use the original. Now, so I've got my camera rotation, and I've got layers over here. They're a little different. The first thing I want to do is drop in a background, like have a kind of a neutral background in the back there. So made a layer, we'll fill that. So you can, it's kind of fun. You can put any kind of background you like in there. Obviously it's Photoshop. So for Walking Dead, I want a very diffuse lighting. So I'm going to click on the object layer and go to this tab here, and I would dial up the ambient, just so I don't want realistic lighting. I want to be able to see the details of the model, but not, not too intensely. I mostly want to see the texture map. Right, now for the texture map, oh, and I'm going to check the size of this. This is let's make this a 2K. And double clicking on the diffuse map here, and this should also be 2K. Hopefully my machine can support this. She's getting old. Now we just need some maps. So I'm going to go find those bakes I made, which are over here. And to begin, I'm going to grab that baked lighting, and I'll flatten that before I try to copy it. Drop it in here, save the scene, and so there you go. So there's the texture map on the model, but we're not done yet. I've got a couple more maps to load, so I would like the color map as well. So there we go. Also, I like to put a neutral gray behind my color, so I'm going to do that and flatten that there. And I'm going to move the baked lighting to the on top of there. So here we go. What we want is, just to give you an idea, we're going to set this to overlay. So we've got that baked lighting on top of the kind of general color, and that is what's giving you a lot of the detail. Now if I just go back to the model, we still, you still have a bit of a light source there, but that's okay. Okay, so let's just look at the texture for a minute. So we've got color map, baked lighting. I'll throw the AO on because I might use that, but not immediately. There's our AO, and we would multiply that, turn it down to about 25. Right, but here's the real meat of it. I'll set this back to normal. So what I'm going to do with this is run some filters. So I had a whole action set up. I had some particular filters, and they were basically the artistic filters, and I used watercolor, and then I also used the dry brush. So let's take a look at that. So to begin, I will duplicate this layer. So we can always go back to our source easily. So under filter, artistic, the first thing I'm going to start with is dry brush. And I'm kind of guesstimating my original settings. I know I put the brush sizes way up, and I've dialed the texture right down, and we'll click OK. And there you go. You'll notice that starts to have a little bit more of a graphic feel to it. before, after. The other thing I did was the watercolor filter. And also, again, I've put the brush detail up to like 14 and dialed that texture down. Click OK. And so there's quite a difference now. So if we put this on overlay and go back to the model, it's starting to feel a lot more graphic and Walking Dead-like. One of the things that, so we couldn't use a toon shader, a cell shader. We wanted to have some kind of dramatic lighting. It's The Walking Dead, right? So you're going to have scary lighting. But between the art director and myself, we determined that to really kind of get that graphic look we wanted, a lot of the time we used very ambient lighting, so things were controlled a lot by the textures themselves. So to simulate that, when painting these textures, I'm going to dial up the ambient color on the scene of it. So now we're really just looking at the texture map itself, and you can see how the texture map's giving you the illusion of lighting. Back to the texture itself, we've got our baked lighting, we've run some filters on it, we've got our color map. The next thing I would do would be to start kind of painting in layers on top of that. So here's where 3D paint in Photoshop kicks in, and it is a little bit weird. One of the things I found it helped with these models to have, sometimes I would literally smooth the model just for painting, but the cool thing is you can make a layer in the 3D paint window. So clicking on that layer, and I'm going to just so this is where Photoshop actually had some advantages, because if you ever tried to paint in Substance Painter, it's not really set up for old school painting. It's all about generators and smart materials, etc. So good old paintbrush in Photoshop, and you can sample the colors, and this made it nice and easy. So here I could start to introduce a little of my hand painting into the model. So let's say I want to pick out some of these details. And this would kind of enhance the hand painted look some more, because yeah, I literally am hand painting. It does get a little bit kludgy. So right now this is a layer. So you absolutely cannot turn the camera or it'll be off center. So then you frequently would merge down. So where it's a bit hacky, and now that's on the model. You can paint in the 3D viewport, but I found that back in 2011 that was so slow and cumbersome that the easiest thing was to make a layer and paint on that, And so I would paint over the model. For the actual characters, especially the human characters, I'd paint quite extensively over the model. But here I'm just, we're just mucking around a bit, giving it a little bit of what have you. And I might, for example, maybe make some kind of faux highlights. This is where you had to be careful, because it could, it could break the illusion if you got too specific with things. But let's say, I'm going to I always found like wet, shiny stuff, you kind of want to go with a complementary color. So if this is kind of orangey red, I'm going to go with a bluey color, and then I might say, that some lights catch in there. So as you can see, it was a bit of a time-consuming process, because you're dealing with slow computers, the technology at the time. But we did come up with a system that was relatively quick for the time. So in addition to the painting, the other key ingredient for the Walking Dead textures was the inking. And that's, there's a bit of a philosophy that goes into that. So I think I'll save that for the next session because I don't want this video to get too long and I don't want to bore you guys. Hopefully you didn't get bored too much, and I hope maybe you enjoyed this little journey into the world of character creation for The Walking Dead. I certainly did. I had a blast making this video, I gotta tell you. So thank you for watching this far, and I'll join me for next session, and we'll take a look at the inking process. And until then, happy modeling and ciao. If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe, and feel free to leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you.